All the usurped governments of the world have stood opposed to a proof of absolute solution for the past 30 years. Every president since and including Gerald Ford has been provided a proof of mathematically perfected economy and a prescription for immediately converting any present system to mathematically perfected economy in days and without cost. President Obama promised change. He asked to believe not just in his ability to change Washington, he asked to believe in ours. This is no more than a hollow promise if he fails to deliver true solution. But it is betrayal if he stands in the way of solution, even for a moment, while 10,000 homes a day go into foreclosure, and as I was told just days ago, 125,000 children under the age of 12 roam the streets of Los Angeles homeless. Candidate Obama meant to be interpreted, at least, that the door to restoring the very representation which is central to a republic would not be closed to solution, it would be opened. Reagan, of course, likewise ran on an unqualified promise of change. But as you see, like so many before him then, Mr. Obama has hired the same genre of rat to administer to the chicken coop. The very same people who have spent their lives engaged in this exploitation and who most will seek to perpetuate it. Perhaps not surprisingly then, a proposition of mathematically perfected economy, which was requested by Obama campaign regulars this past September, was returned by Mr. Obama's so-called economic policy team without even opening it. I submit that it is unimaginable that they do not know who I am and what I am about, not just in the 100 attempts to acquire explanation since, or the several recent appeals by others in the past few days, which have been submitted directly to Obama advisors. Make of this what you will, but ask them yourselves just a few vital questions on which the survival of our very republic hinges. Is there any other way to solve inflation and deflation than maintaining a circulation which at all times is equal to the remaining value of represented wealth? Is it not an object of the so-called economic policy team to solve either circulatory inflation or deflation, or price inflation? Is it possible to solve either if interest obligates us to pay more out of circulation than even represented the original value of that wealth? No, of course not. Or if so, how, purported economic policy team? Why do they evade engaging us on these vital issues? Because it is impossible to avert failure under a terminal sum of debt by preserving the very process which inherently and irreversibly multiplies debt in proportion to a vital circulation, which is exactly what they intend to do. I know and they know that their arguments cannot stand over mine, and I have spent too many years at this to hold out false hope. We must stand, and we must stand together, or all the things which this country once stood for will soon pass away in the blink of an eye, while we chance to think wrongly that good men preside over a destiny we can already see only points to further destruction. It may be our prerogative to cast our destiny to fate, hoping irresponsible parties will deliver the justice which instead, to this very moment, they adamantly resist. But it is not our prerogative to pass our debts on to others, and it is certainly callous and unhonorable to do so to our own progeny. 25 years ago, I provided the Reagan administration with computer models which projected not only that Reagan would triple the entire previous national debt of our country, but that his preposterous plan would fail both to balance the budget or stave price inflation. Most importantly of all, those models demonstrated that the present implementation of the so-called Federal Reserve System would inherently collapse under a terminal sum of debt at approximately 2010 AD. The unconstitutional privatization of currency which this system imposes upon us, and any currency like it, is the way to destruction. As I wrote 30 years ago, the system is neither federal nor a reserve of anything. It was imposed upon us for the very sake of just such vast, escalated, unearned taking. The models I provided Reagan were posted open source to pre-official web bulletin boards in the early 1980s, complete with documentation of this thesis of inherent monetary failure as a consequence of interest. You can still download said models from our web pages, plug in 1980s data, and reproduce the same projection of the present failure. And so, as we shall soon understand, if it were not in fact for decades of denied representation, we would never have come to suffer the present manifesting consequences evident everywhere around us. Reagan couldn't prove or even argue an alternate solution for inflation, deflation, or inherent multiplication of debt into terminal debt either. But thus we could have established mathematically perfected economy 30 years ago. It is the intended preservation of this means of exploitation, then, which ensures the consequences of these systems, unless we, the people of the world, rise to demand immediate adoption of mathematically perfected economy by means which were formally established 30 years ago, and of which I spoke less formally for 10 years prior to that. The subject thesis of inherent monetary failure argues that merely to maintain a vital circulation, it is necessary to reborrow principal and interest paid out of the general circulation in the obligation to service any existent sum of debt. Insofar as it is necessary to reborrow payments against principal obligations, then, it is mathematically impossible to pay down the sum of debt, as whatever pays down an existent sum of debt is necessarily reborrowed as a subsequent debt equal to the former. But as whatever we pay against interest counts none against a former sum of debt, thus whatever interest we must reborrow to maintain a vital circulation comprises new debt above a previous sum of debt. It is this obligation, then, to reborrow interest in order to maintain a vital circulation, which inherently and irreversibly multiplies the sum of debt in proportion to a vital circulation.